All right. Well, gracias, Nico. You definitely got the questions doc popping. Um, so yeah, now instead of the specific server stuff, he at the very end there started to touch upon our specific API endpoints, but at this very moment, we only have one single actual endpoint beyond the wildcard catch all endpoint. We only have the /API/test. And all that does is it gives us back a singular boring string. So we want our cat book to actually have more useful endpoints, ones that actually dynamically store and retrieve data. But to do that, we have to do some more fancy things. So we'll kind of get started in our terminal world with resetting, fetching. Let me use my pointer. Resetting, fetching, and checking out to the starter, which is exactly where we left off, actually. I just copy and pasted it. Um, so yeah, we will, if this doesn't block my way, get reset dash dash hard, get fetch, and get, see, look, I didn't even quite fetch up to the beginning. Um, and hopefully with all hopes will be good. If you're not good, then we can oh yeah, you can't see my terminal because I just shared. Let me fix that. I don't like Zoom. Zoom is not my favorite. I have to full screen Zoom again. All right, let's hope sharing just the whole screen doesn't backfire on me. But yeah, all I did was execute these commands anyways. So we'll just, I don't really have anything to explain. Nico did the hard part of explaining things for me. Thank you, Nico. So we can jump right into the actual code itself as much as you might hate it. So we're gonna start in the API.js in the server folder, and API.js is a brand new file. Yes, thank you for asking. So we'll jump on over and we'll see that here in the server, we have API.js. And so what will we do in this file? Well, we're gonna define a few more routes. And we're trying to separate out our actual server code from our normal API code. So the first thing we'll do is we'll actually get our router going in this lovely file. So we'll have our const router equals express dot router. Ta-da. Don't you love it when libraries make things much, much easier for you? And from there, we want this router to be able to be used in other files, so that we can do a little more fancy things. We'll see exactly how we'll use it in other files here in a minute. But in order to do that, it's not quite the same as exporting our normal React files. In this case, we have our module.exports equals router to export it in this case. So we'll just add that to the bottom here. And with that, now we've caught our API.js up for now, but now we actually have to tell our server that our API is not in server.js anymore. So we have to tell, just like we had our server use this express, except instead of like a library now, we have our own internal library of sorts, our API.js. So we're gonna go ahead and import our API file into our server by using this require function here. So in server.js, we'll throw this right below where we had our express before. So I'm just going to throw this in here with const API equals require, if I can spell correctly today, /API.js. And so now our server knows that this API exists and will utilize the functions that exist within it when we actually add them. But we haven't quite added any endpoints yet, and but when we do add endpoints, we'll have to have the bottom thing. I think this Google Slides thing ends up covering the code repeatedly. But yeah, so just like with our API will be used as a middleware of sorts through this app.use, and so we can tell all of the routes that go to /API to instead be routed just simply to our API file. So to do that, we'll throw below our other app.use for the JSON. The order of these app.uses does indeed matter. So we're throwing it here such that the server and the post request JSON stuff runs before we add this. So next we'll throw in app.use. Yes, the API file will start dealing with this instead here very shortly. So the /API, anything that goes to /API will now instead go to this API file, which is kind of what we want. We want our separation of mind thoughts. We want all of our specific server stuff to exist in our server file and our specific API stuff to exist in our API file. So with that in there, we still have our one existing route within the server.js file, and we want this poor route to get out of our server. We don't want it here. He's not fun anymore. And so instead, we'll move it over into API.js and remove the one from server.js. But that won't be all we'll do exactly, as now the app is instead our router. And because all of our routes that exist in API are already mapped to this /API, we don't have to have the /API at the front, and instead we can just have /test. And so to do that, we can just highlight this puppy. We can cut. We can go over to API, and I'm going to throw it right below the creation of the router there. And instead of app.get, I'll do router.get. And instead of /API, we will simply have /test. And to make sure I've differentiated things, I'm gonna throw this little line at the end there. So hopefully, if we save both of our files right quick, and we have this layout in our API.js now, we should be able to test it out by having our in a terminal window here. We should be able to just run npm start, and so now I have a server running on port 3000. And so just like before, I'm gonna open up a local host thingy. So I can do local host 3000. And if I can type today, that'd be really great. But this Zoom share thing keeps covering up the address bar. /API/ test. And so indeed, we've made things work again. So we have what Nico had before, but now it's in its own file. That might not seem just too useful to you, but you'll probably thank me if you end up adding 24 endpoints in your future web lab projects. If you already had start running, then you can probably just Control C it and restart the npm start thingy. So now we are in a position to actually do the more useful things I keep mentioning, but keep pushing back further and further. I swear I'm actually going to eventually do them. I'm not just talking about voodoo magic. So yeah, if things are wonky for you, you can just go into terminal. I'm going to reset my current changes and then check out to W5 step 1. That way it also adds a couple beautiful comments. There's not really much to the comments, but here we are. And so now we can focus on our actual catbook routes. We've been dodging this bullet for a long time because it's kind of hard to set up your own server and API sometimes. But for starters, if we want dynamically stored and retrieved data, we kind of want to start out with some data we want to start with some place to hold data. Now, for now, we don't really have a database. Johan's going to cover that later today. But for the time being, since we don't have users or a database, we're just going to, at the top of api.js, we're going to declare two variables here, an object data to hold stories and comments, and a const variable to hold our username. It can be whatever you want it. I'm not going to use anonymous user, but so we can navigate over to our api.js, and just at the top here, I'm going to have const my name be hackerman to match up with the slides. Additionally, we still not const. We want our data to be mutable. So we want data to hold two things. We want data to first hold stories. And stories will be more than one thing. So we're going to have an array here. And then we're going to add a stories object. And I don't know if you remember what the stories object contains. Do I have a slide that shows that? Part of this slide didn't load. All right, the stories object holds three values. We have the ID of each story, the creator name, and the content of each story, being a number and two strings respectively. Thank you, Claire. I'll look into that in a sec. But so for the time being, since this is the first of all of the stories, I'm going to give this an ID of 0. I'm going to give the name to the lovely Shannon Wu here, and then we will set not connect content to be the statement, I love corgis. I'm sure Shannon will tell you all of the love for corgis that she has. But not only that, we also have to contend with the comments. And the comments is almost identical to the stories, except that we also have a parent ID. And so we want this comment to be attached to this story, and so the parent is going to be the same as this ID. So we will go ahead and hard code in our comments real quick. Totally not me double checking, I don't goof this. So we'll throw in our one and only comment. So just like before, this is our first comment. So we will have one singular ID. And we also have a creator name. Jessica Tang is no longer with us, so I'm gonna give it to the other Jessica. As stated before, we have to make it match that previous parent. And then we want our content to be our generic, totally not deadpan stuff here. And so, wow, with all of that random hard coding, we've made a data object to store our data. This will be useful for you for all of 1 hour. Enjoy this so much effort for so little actual usefulness. Bam, reload. We're gonna refresh the page. We'll see if Google Slides wants to work with me. Yeah, so yeah, I use the username HackerMan. If you don't know what this is, knowyourmeme.com HackerMan, because you need to be cultured in this day and age. So moving on past the meme, Nico touched on this a bit earlier on what rec and res is, but to be a little more specific, more so in the practice of how we use it, our rec will be our incoming request. We will access its stuff through rec query and rec body, and there are quite a few other things in rec. If your IDE shows you all of the stuff within rec, go you. Res will be the server's response that we get to make in this lovely workshop. And res will send back an object, and we can also send back status codes with that object. And so now will be a more application of that idea. So we have our first actual useful endpoint that we need to make after all this time. So what does the /API/stories route actually need to do? So it needs simply just to send all the stories back to the front end. So this makes things a little easier for us. But first, I'm gonna ponder this question with you. How do we access all the stories that we've made? We literally just made something that holds all the stories for us. What is it? We're gonna sit here until one of you say it. Data, ta-da. Yeah, so we have all of the stories neatly held within data.stories. And so to send back all the stories in our API, all we have to do is add another endpoint. Instead of /test, we're going to have /stories that sends back the stories object. So over here in api.js, we will, below this test here, we'll have router.get, because this is a get request. We will have /stories, and it'll follow the exact same structure as before. We'll have the rec and the res. It would help if I didn't do the plus sign. I always end up doing that. And so all we want to do in this is to send back data.stories. And well, bam, we've made our first actually useful endpoint. If you want, you can now go to your localhost 3000, and instead of /API/test, I don't know if I saved this. There we go. So now that it's saved, I should be able to do /API/stories, and bam, we have our actual dynamic thing. Anything that I type in the data stories thing will be returned here as a JSON object. But I've been talking for absolute ages. And so now you guys have a chance to do something. But before I throw you out on your own, I should probably explain something. So yesterday during Claire's lecture, I think, we threw this thing in here, and you might not have understood exactly what it was, but hopefully by the end of the day today, you will understand exactly what it is. So this parent property is passed in with our GET request, and so it is part of our query. Uh, we want to access comments that have whatever the ID is for that prop, because remember, this prop was passed down from that parent story. So this is getting the comments that are attached to that story. And so we'll break down every single API endpoint for us, just to cycle this through and through, because you'll probably have to sit and do this with some of your later API endpoints. So we've said it quite a bit already, but this route needs to get you the comments that the story is attached to. And to break that down even further, first of all, you need to figure out what story the comments are attached to using rec.query. And then you need to filter out your comments such that you only get comments that are attached to that story, and then send back those comments. So now you get to do it. So your objective for the next little bit, you can go in breakout rooms if you need help, but your objective for, I'll probably give you guys a few minutes, is to add an API route below the /stories one that gets the comments for a particular story. So you'll need to figure out what story they come from, what comments, filter out the comments such that they only come from that story, and then send those comments back to the front end. And here are a couple little hints to help in that endeavor. So we're just going to sit in sort of awkward silence. Feel free to spam the questions doc. I'll be paying attention to Zoom chat if you wish to lure me to Moon Pond. Just whatever. I'll be here for a couple minutes. Somebody shout at me if I've waited too long. Let's see how the queue's doing. Hey, that's a pretty clear queue. I need to see more movement here. Not to sound like ninja here, but I need to see some more movement in the queue there. That's not fun. Are you guys really not struggling at all? I mean, that's all more power to me, I guess. I guess I'm just the perfect professor here, but I doubt that's true. Yes, Tommy, I explicitly mentioned Ninja by name. You know, there are a lot of people that blame the events of uh, the previous year on the fact that nobody did the movement with Ninja. So if you want good 2021 luck, I better see some movement in that queue. I'll give you 2 more minutes. Flossed, brushed, mouthwashed, the whole 9 yards. Always good dental hygiene. All right. Well, I think I've waited long enough. I don't feel like wasting any more of your time. If you're still struggling, there will be a chance to catch up not too long, and there's always help queue no matter what time of day it is. We actually ended up helping somebody in the help queue while we were trying to grade yesterday. That was pretty funny. Uh, so spoiler alert now. So we'll use the ID contained within rec query. We'll use filter and we'll send them back to the front end with res.send. So in code terms, we're going to have a little sub variable here within our normal API route to accomplish this. So we will, yes, as Tommy said, please don't join the help queue while we're trying to grade, but I just wanted to say it was a funny experience. But yeah, so now we can go in our code here and we can add the endpoint that we want. So we want our slash comment uh, endpoint here. More accurately, as the get endpoint of the slash comment route. For our current purposes, those are the same thing, but we'll see here in a minute that those will start to have different meanings. So as I showed on the slide, we want to get the filtered comments, and all filtered comments will be data.comments.filter, and I'm going to do it this way, where we take a parent and we pass it such that the rec dot query, and I'm forgetting if we'll have the well, I messed things up. See, this is why live coding sucks. Yeah, so we'll for every single comment we'll have the comments parent be equal, and we're using double equals here for a specific reason. So when the ID is passed from the front end to the back end, it does weird type conversion stuff, and so triple equals will fail even though it has the same value. So double equals is unfortunately necessary here. Not, yeah, so here we have made our filtered comments object. And so now we can just simply res.send our filtered comments. Ta-da. So now we can end up, if we do start and hot loader, we can now look at this instead of just looking at it in our normal way. So I have start running here, and I'm going to, it would probably help if I saved these files. If we get a hot loader running, and not hot loaders, hot loader running in a I'm going to let you guys handle the question in the chat. So now that we have a hot loader and a npm start running, we can go into Chrome and we can get localhost 5000 up and going. And you'll see that because we did all the front end work yesterday of this stuff, so on the front end made its request to /API/stories, and it made its request to /API/comment yesterday. We can see that the comments and stuff are working again. Except now you're actually on your own local computer are running the server for this. So now Heroku will stop hopefully crashing on us at every possible instance that it can. Can I show the code to give comments again? Yeah, I can. So all we have is the same setup of the /stories, except in between here, we're going to filter with the built-in JavaScript filter function that Justin, I believe, mentioned in his intro to JavaScript lecture on Tuesday. I mean, I get it. Tuesday was a really, really long time ago. Yeah, also be careful. It is /comment. It does bug me too. We should probably work on that. And just make sure the filter works out as it should. But assuming everything else is working together, you might notice one extra little problem. So if I go into Catbook here, we'll go to the actual Catbook, not a screenshot. If I go into Catbook and I want to type a comment, yeet, absolutely nothing happened. That's not what we wanted. So if I open the console, as any good developer will do when something bad happens, we notice something. There's a problem. There's this thing called a post request that didn't happen. So yeah, we've only made GET requests. We've only learned how to get data. We haven't done the work in order to actually create data. And so it's giving us a status of 404 because we don't have an endpoint. There's nothing to be found there. So guess what? We're gonna work on actually creating some data now. And so we're not happy. So what we can do now is if you're still having issues with the get stuff, you can either give up or go to the help queue. If you still need understanding, I would definitely recommend not giving up. But if you if you feel you have the mental grasp, you can catch up to us with W5 step 2, which I'm going to do just for safety's sake. So git reset dash dash hard and git checkout W5 dash step 2. All right. So now we can work together to handle. So yeah, one extra little thing as a slight aside before we jump straight into post requests is Nico covered handling missing API routes for the for just the general case non/API stuff. So one extra tiny little thing I kind of want to add in just to cover every little base is we can use this router.all. So all, just to verbally say it here, normally it will ignore if I did if I made a post request to /API/test, it would still be a 404 even though I have something for that test. So this all will cover all of the potential HTTP methods and requests to it. And so we're going to add this router.all in order to cover our butts, and remember that we will add it to the bottom so that way we don't override some stuff. So we're going to add at the bottom router.all, and we will have the wildcard token to cover all of our potential routes that don't already exist. And so what exactly do we want to do when a route fails? So naturally, we want to inform them a little bit. So we're going to log the specific method and URL by which they failed, and then we're going to send them a 404 status code. So we'll have our console.log. We're going to do the weird tick thing. So we're going to say API route not found. And we're going to tell them the, this notation bothers me, but it works. So we're going to tell them the specific, so now we're going to use rec for once. So rec has a method, and rec also has a URL within it and that we can both access. Now that we have that made, we can also set our status real quick. So we're going to set res.status to 404, and then after that we can append the send of a object, and we will say API. This is not just the most useful of messages to send back, but we'll send them back with the message that the API route is not found. And this should cover, if I save this real quick and go over to Chrome, I'll have to be a little bit quicker as we're running a little low on time, but we can do web lab time. I'm sure you love the idea of web lab time. So yeah, if I do /API/yeet, it does indeed give me the API route that it's not found. That's what we expected. We're all good. So now we can jump back into the train of post request stuff. So we kind of covered the post body yesterday on the front end side, but today we want to cover the back end side. And the back end side, we just as before, we sent the parent when we add a comment, and we also get the content when we add a comment, value being the text of what was ever in that text box for typing our comment. And so we can see that the request that we end up getting will have our ID and the text that they wrote to us. And so this notes our difference between rec query and rec body. So for post requests, we're less worried about the query and more worried about this body here, because this body will contain the data that we wish to make. So as before, I'm going to cover the stories thing. So we first need to figure out what data needs to be saved. We need to put it in a structure that we've already defined, and we need to add it to our data object. So what I'm going to do is we're going to have a /story endpoint for the post, and it's going to have, just as in our data.stories, it's going to have the same thing, except actually we're going to fill them in with variables rather than hard coding them as we did before. And so it'll take a structure very similar to what we had before. After these GET requests, I will add this router.post, and it will be a post request to /story. And just like with the GET requests, there's not a difference in that regard. It will have that. And so we're going to define the structure of our the thing we want to save. And so our first thing, we want the ID. In our case, we're just going to make the ID the number, the number, the biggest number, the number of actual stories we have. And so a shorthand way of figuring out the number of stories that we have, one more than the number of stories that we have, is data.stories.length. Ta-da. Creator name, this is why we ended up defining that my name thing earlier. And content, we know where to get the content because we know what rec.body.content has in it. And you'll see that matches what we got in the slides. So from here, we can first add that on to our stories. Otherwise, our internal story list never changes. So we're gonna push my story into the stories object, and then kind of as convention to actually send them the response, we want them to know that they actually successfully sent it. We can send back the my story object to them. And bam, we have created a method to create stories. And so if I save this and I go again back to our newsfeed, and I'm going to refresh this. Hopefully, if all goes well, HackerMan will be in. So we should be able to hit submit, and ta-da, HackerMan is in. But no, we don't quite have comments working yet, so yeet cannot be appended to the end there. So now, if I'll give a very brief period, but I would definitely like it if you guys could try and figure out how creating comments would work. It's again, just like with the get comments request, it follows very similarly to the post request of comments. I think there's literally a 1 line difference apart from changing everything from stories to comment. So I'm a give 3 minutes there. I hope that's enough time, but we are cutting things just a tad bit close. And I do enjoy you guys eating food. I do enjoy you guys being moderately healthy. Hopefully just a tad more healthy than I am. So we'll try and let things go. But help queue is always open um, because it's running on a server. Haha. So I'll sit here and shut up for 2 minutes. All right. I hope you enjoyed your peace and serenity. It is now, I guess, in your Eastern time, folks, 2:30. So we're gonna give you the spoiler alert. Yeah, pretty much the only major difference is now you get to add the parent, which was passed along with the request yesterday. So I'm gonna try and speed run this a little bit. So we'll have a router.post to the exact same route that we had earlier. This is where the difference between endpoints and routes comes in, is that the post endpoint of the comment route comes in. So we'll have that. We'll have const. Do I call it my comment, new comment? We are very consistent people here at Web Lab staff. So the ID, as before, if I can type, will be data.comments.length. So, and then we will creator name there will be my name, and then parent we said was coming from rec dot in this case it comes from body.parent, and then we have the content which comes from rec.body.content blah. And so there we created our comment, but now we have to again push that to our array to keep it a running tab, and then we send that new comment back to them so that we know that they got it and everything's all good. So now, hopefully, if we save this, we go in here and we open our local host again. I'm going to refresh. It's going to get rid of my I'm in. So I'm going to add I'm in again. and we don't have enter that automatically sends it, blah. And we're just gonna add yeet to the bottom of that. And whoop-de-doo. Basset hounds are better. And you can't do anything about it because this, for now, just exists with me and me alone. Yeah, and I don't think we have just a whole lot left, so your food will not be too far away. So we already did that test. So what comes up next is you might notice that if we refresh, everything just goes away. This is because that data variable gets reinstantiated every single time we start the server with a refresh. So what Johan will cover after lunch is databases, which will be a persistent way of storing our data, and that whole hard-coded data mess will be absolutely useless. Now, one extra side little note before we let you guys go is you need to get MongoDB actually set up. You should have done that last night, but if you didn't, you got like 20 minutes. You better speed run that. You better have fun. Come on, get to it. Does the other staff have something to shout at me for? Any day now. I'm leaning towards no. All right. Well, in that case, somebody can take over this and start
Sorry,
streaming the music.
something to shout at.
Okay.
Make sure that if you haven't created a MongoDB Atlas account, you follow the instructions that are on Piazza.
All right. Well, somebody can start streaming music in my stead because nobody's going to like it when I start streaming music, as it's both metal and copyrighted. I will stop sharing.